It is March 13th, 2015, and I was just talking about clones. So, so anyway, however the United States did it, they did clone my daughters, and they were taking my daughters away from me for government experimentation and, I believe, torture. I don't see why they wouldn't torture my babies when they did all that they did to me. And they were trying to make sure that I was as far from them as possible so that they could never connect with me and be safe. And anyway, during this time of their plots to use me for cloning and create more government victims for themselves to abuse, they were planning on all kinds of things, like raping me with group rape. And then I think what their plan was, from the first programming sessions that they were doing over at Adam's house, is by having me say yes, yes, they're creating an appearance of consent. Because I think what ultimately their goal was is probably to get me to a location, rape me, have it look like I was consenting, and then have some kind of a, either use a cell phone to record the conversation so that it sounded like consent, and then maybe a video camera to make it appear that I was consenting by not fighting back or by participating in what looked like consensual sex. And then I think that the government then wanted to have that documentation so that they could spread around, maybe internally, for defaming me, to tell other individuals I was just a liar. You know, like, here she is making reports about being raped and she lied. You know, look at this. And in actuality, I haven't lied. They've really done these things to me. So, as I've described, part of the whole government strategy against me, since I was very little, was to force me to allow myself to be raped and to make it look like I was okay with it or going along with it or that I wanted it. So the other aspect of this planned coordinated raping of me, which, as I said, you know, I was explaining the clones thing, but as I said, they were planning to use that as a situation where they would have me then talk about it and try to make sure that that through my talking about this sort of a thing, they could make my entire family sound unsafe and have my baby adopted away from all of us so that I never got to see my babies ever, which is what they did with all my baby girls. And, you know, they made a lot of money off of me. They did not just steal a lot of all the songs that I wrote and made the most money off of that. They were also sexually trafficking me. You know, I was pretty when I was, I guess, a baby and a toddler and a little girl. And they were trafficking me around and getting paid money to have people sexually assault me. And I think some people just got off on it, too. And so then the second part of this programming of me was how they were going to get me to go to the location they wanted me to go to. And I think that it was also that they wanted me to believe Kate Middleton was the reason why they were doing this to me. Because they used Kate Middleton as the trigger, talking about Kate Middleton as the trigger for how to get me to a location. And then they were later going to make comments about how, like, I was a slut. You know, like, they would rape me and then accuse me of being a slut and how Katie was so great or whatever. And I mean Katie Middleton as in Catherine Elizabeth Middleton, the person over in England, who this country wanted to have married into the royal family. And I think that's for spy purposes, because I think they have been getting a lot from the Middletons for a long time. And I think they just want another one in there. But I'm going to talk about the rest of that after a little bit later. So I will next talk about the the programming that occurred when they used my mom, because they first used my dad on one side of that, and then they had my mother involved in a different part of programming of me. And in doing that, they brought over a whole bunch of their girls that I later had to go to school with, who then decades later were at that bar where I was getting positioned to be raped by Robin Bechtel a second time. So I will explain these triggers that they forced me to repeat. It was like several weeks and months of forced repetition of my having to say certain things when they said certain things. So, for example, they would say something like, you really have to, like, why don't you don't even have a boyfriend, or something. They'd say something like that. But it was more specific than that. And then, it was something very specific, and then it was a trigger and a cue, and they forced me to say, well, I'm not Kate Middleton, I'm not just sleeping around, I want to wait until I'm married to have sex. And they made me say things like that. They made me say a specific phrase, actually, repeatedly to their comment, and they used this electrocution head brace on me. I guess I will go ahead and just describe some of this right now. They used the electrocution head brace on me repeatedly to force me to keep saying what they wanted me to say. So they'd make me say this, and then they'd put this brace on my head, and they'd crank up the controls and electrocute me. And then after that, they'd take it off after a while, and I would just be like stunned, basically totally out of it, and they'd make me practice more like that. And then if I didn't do it exactly the way they wanted me to do it, they'd put that torture brace on my head again and turn up the controls and send an electric surge through my head. And they just would keep doing it. And what the government did at that time is, while these women, they were all women mostly, while these women were programming me to have this response about, or a comment about Kate Middleton, and what turned out to be their whole strategy, like all put together, was that one of them was going to say something to me about, why don't you do such and such, or something implying that I didn't have a boyfriend or whatever. And then the trigger was that I would respond with this comment, snide comment about Katie Middleton. And then from that comment, my comment specifically, they were then going to plan on creating an opportunity of an invitation for me to meet them at a location which would look innocent and innocuous. And I would show up, and then they were going to play out the second part of their rape scheme, which was getting me to drink, and then instead of allowing me to go home with the person who's supposed to be my ride, Eric Ballinger, forcing me to go with Robin Bechtel, the planned rapist, who then carried out the entire rape according to this programmed method that the government had set up in Adam's offices. And so, so when I was getting programmed with this second half to this about Kate Middleton, that involved mostly all women. And then what they also did is they were bringing in their daughters. Like, there were some set women that were there that were constantly programming me and putting this brace on my head and frying me, basically, making me repeat the same things. And then they had government employees, like the mothers, with the daughters coming over to me, one by one. And that was in Moses Lake, and they would come over one by one to my house. And another time it was in a different location. It wasn't my house, but it was another location in a room. And they had these government employees with their kids. For example, Shannon Adams, the same age as me, and Monica Allen, and Erica Wiltbank. Even though Erica didn't show up at the bar, she did show up for torturing me at my house. And Erica Ballinger and Christy Ballinger, but Eric Ballinger is there specifically for that. And anyway, in the next video clip that I make, Nanette, in the next video clip that I make, I will describe more of the names of the mothers and their daughters that came over to do this to me. And then I will kind of explain how they use that, how the government used this altogether for their rape plan, and then how they carried that out. So that's what I'm going to talk about, at least for right now, on the 13th of March.